and good morning friends. Welcome to CEC-UGC Live Lecture. Dear friends, we have been discussing a lot about media theories as well as their effect on society as well as its people. Today we are going to discuss one of the most important theories which we called as audience theory, and for this we have again with us in our studios Shashwati Goswami. She is one of the leading academician from one of the leading institutions, that is Indian Institute of Mass Communication. So first of all, I would like to welcome our guest Shashwati Goswami. Ma'am, welcome to the EduSet lecture, and I hope the way we discussed on lots of theories and try to understand about the effects, today also we are going to discuss and learn through you more.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to another lecture, and today I'll be discussing with you audience theory. What is an audience theory? How do we construct the idea of audience? The point is, audience theory, those theories which comes under this purview, they look at media from what it really does with the audience and how does the audience react to it. So there are a number of theories which comes under the purview of audience theory, but before that, let us try to understand what is media audience. Is it a people who consumes a particular content of media? What do you think? When I say it's a media audience, who are they? Is it really already the prevalent social group to which a particular media caters to? Say for example, say you have a community radio in your area, and that media caters to only your community, which is within the 10 kilometers radius of that community radio. So is it that audience, or maybe both in one who is consuming the media, those people who are in the particular group? When we call, sometimes we do this, we just say that the audience is this or audience is that. But when we try to analyze it, then we find that even trying to explain media audience is not very easy. But remember, audiences are both a cause of and a response to various forms of messages. Let me explain. There is a message which targets the audience. Say there is a message on say anti-tobacco, cigarette smoking is harmful to health, cigarette smoking can lead to cancer. This message is a cause of what? Of some audience really smoking. And it is also a response to what? This message is a response to people suffering from oral cancer or any form of other lung cancer or such cancer which is caused by tobacco. I hope you understand now. So audiences are both a cause of and a response to various forms of messages. The idea of audience dates back to before even when the new technology of media had happened. Now when I say new technology of modern media, it's very complicated, because when I now say it's new technology or new media, you might think that I'm referring to social media, internet dependent media or digital media or something like that. But you have to remember, when radio started, when print started, when television started, every media form of media was a modern technology. That was modern mass media. And look at it, it's so hilarious that this modern mass media of one time has now become the traditional media. I'm sure when your teachers refer to traditional media, they are actually speaking about print or print media or radio or television. You have to remember, before the time when the idea of audience had started, that audience was a very controlled group, like the audience of a theater or the audience in a hall, in churches, in religious organizations, say the temples, the masjid, mosque. So it's a controlled group. They are from, say, if it's a religious group, then they belong to that particular religion. If someone is going to watch a theater, or a drama show, it's just those people who like that or want to be there, these are the people. Everybody doesn't just throng in. Like, unlike what we do now, we just put on the television, everybody is trying to just flipping through television channels, and everybody is without even understanding, sometimes we look through 2-3 channels, but we become an audience of that channel as well. These groups, when the new before modern technology, these groups had the potential to be controlled by authority and elicit an institutionalized form of collective behavior. So what was this group? There was an authority controlling over them. So when the theater gate closes, it closes. Say you want to, you are going to the religious sermon somewhere, then when it stops, it stops. You are controlled according to the time of that particular sermon. And what the authority wanted was to elicit a form of collective behavior. You are supposed to pray when everybody is praying. You are supposed to clap. You clap when everyone is clapping in a theater show. So all these things were the audience, composition of audience before modern media was different. Their behavior was different. The expectations from that audience was different. The printing press, however, changed the nature of audience for the first time when it created a reading public. Now this reading public was not confined to a geographical territory. Say at that time you could not, when it just started, the printing press, you obviously could not get a copy of a book from the other side of the continent, but sometimes you could. Say one of your cousins, say my grandfather, say my people from the generation of my grandfather, they were rarely traveling, but when they traveled, they try to, if they are literate people, they try to buy books. So the books, though 2 copies of it would travel. And then I am reading, say my grandfather read from one part of the country, another person is reading from another part of the country, they become a complete audience of a particular media. So they become that's the idea of a reading public. And of course, then there was problem with the new media, new form of media. It created divides, horizontally or vertically. There the divides were like literate and illiterate. Those people who were literate could consume it, the illiterate could not. So this media is not, it doesn't belong to everyone. And when say radio started, it created another group, that was the rich and the poor, because everybody could not afford a radio set. You might laugh, you might smile, but yes, radio sets were quite costly once upon a time. And now, of course, you have your mobile phones have radio available on that, and the cheapest radio sets in fact cost you 50 to 100 rupees. So the point is that at that time when radio started, it created a divide of rich and poor. And of course, the urban and the rural, because many rural people could not access radio, not because it was unaffordable, but because the signals were not available. It was very urban phenomenon. So the population did not become it was not a homogenized composition of audience group, but it was rather divided post the development of modern media. It was divided into literate, illiterate, rich, poor, urban and rural. And what changes was growing commercialization of media also changed the idea of an audience. Community media audience, however, was more a control group, as it was already a public or social group. So new technology in media changed the composition and the qualities of the audience. But the community media was always a very control group, because they belong to either a social group or some public group. This group might be already communicating between themselves, and they were already discussing issues, and then when content was generated, even then they were analyzing that content in their own groups. But then things changed and audience was now regarded as a market. commercialization of media, which happened in a new form of economies, the capitalist economies, it turned audience into a market. Media products became commodities, and it was for consumption, and the consumers were the audience. So even now, when you know that this advertisement is targeted to particular consumers because they are going to buy it, they are going to consume it, and because this is one program which will be watched by one particular audience group, so you are going to advertise products which are more maybe will be bought more by that group. Say a beauty product is mostly sold during shows where there are supposedly there should be more women audience. So media products became commodities, and then it was meant for the consumption of the audience who were consumers. And this was very important. First, because the potential consumers, the audience became the potential consumers for the product, and as well as a consumer of the media content. Just as I explained right now, I am watching a football match or say a cricket match or any game. Then the people who are advertising there, they will not regard me as a potential consumer of that product or neither the media content. What they will advertise mostly is a deo for a man, or a bike for a man, or a car for a man, garments for a man. And when you look at the advertisement, you will see that they are actually deciding that the potential consumer of that content is a man, or at least the maximum number of potential consumer are men. So they are deciding that the consumer is man of that content as well as the product. So the advertisement of the products also differed likewise. But if you see, when cricket became a very popular sports in India, then the advertising quality, the contents changed drastically. There were food contents, advertisement of food, advertisement of other dresses, kitchen utensils, and such things coming up, because then the advertisers decided or realized that this program is being consumed, this content is being consumed by people of all sorts of age or population, and so the advertisements can also cater to such people. So you see, in this context, audience become a consumer of the content as well as a product. They are looked at it like that. This actually projects the relationship between media and the audience, and it is a producer-consumer one. So media is the producer and the audience is a consumer. It regards audience as monolith. You see, nobody thinks that there is socio-economic dynamics when this audience is being talked about. They don't decide, they don't actually discuss that there is a socio-economic dynamics. Say I might be watching a television match, but I might be in a village where there is no big brand food outlets. So that a particular advertisement goes for nothing. For me, I just get to know, okay, such a brand exists, but I cannot be a consumer. Yeah, of course, they can make me aware of it. So next time I am in an urban milieu, I will try to catch hold of that potential, that particular food chain of products. And then I might not be able to actually afford to buy that product. But then I am targeted because I am a potential consumer. So what the advertisers generally tell you is that we are targeting some consumers who will consume and some consumers will be potential consumers. So they regard audience as a monolith. They do not discuss about the socioeconomic dynamics. And in it, even audience are regarded to having only one characteristics, that's a consumer or a buyer. What about a critic? Some people will criticize the advertisement. Why are you they are saying that this particular brand is going to whiten my teeth, but it didn't. It didn't. It's stupid. Actually, it's priced so high, and then we go on buying, hoping then one day my teeth will be white, but it didn't happen. So I'm not going to buy. And in fact, by my criticism, I am deterring a lot of people who are watching that match or watching that program to buy that product. So, this actually doesn't think that audience is a thinking group as well. And in this view, from the perspective of media, and it's not from the perspective of the audience. So, it is media who is thinking about you as an audience, but it's not the audience, what they are thinking is not important. There are challenges about this definition of audiences. The new challenges have come because of the new development in media. See, look at the proliferation of media channels and contents. We have hundreds of channels, hundreds of contents, and every day there is a new program format being muted, and you are urging you to watch that program, but can you really watch everything? So, obviously, the challenge of the media is to look at the audience and the potential consumers from that perspective. And then we have better interactive media vis-a-vis the internet. We are directly interacting with say there are, you have most recently for the last 2 years, 3 years, and in fact it started 4 or 5 years back, the online market, the online bazaar that you have where you can buy things, log on, paying, and then they are trying to tell you that you don't have to look at the clothes online, you can always ask them, try them out, and then if it doesn't fit, you can send it back, we are not going to cost you anything. So, it's more interactive. So, you are not depending on a brand advertisement, rather than that, you are depending on what that online market tells you. And of course, social media had changed a lot. Something that you liked, maybe you had experienced and liked it and appreciated it, but eventually certain posts on social media makes you really question, okay, till now the service was okay, but I'm not sure whether they will continue, because I have got this feedback from some people saying that this particular brand is not okay, this is not good, this is not bad, and things like that. The problem is that because of this proliferation of media, because of interactive media or social media, the public has become more individualized. So, I actually don't talk to my friends over phone or even over the table. What I do is I look at the social media posting of my friends, and then look at the internet, look at reactions. Say there was one example that I can give you, which is a very personal example. One day I got a call from one person saying that we have an organization which actually help people, poor people who are treated in AIMS to get better treatment, means we provide them food, shelter and all these things, because AIMS say the medical care is free. And could you please donate, this is our email address, this is our phone number, etc., etc. I said, I was traveling, so I said, let me just give me a few days, I'll get back to you. Of course, as usual, they started pestering me. Every week there was a phone. Then ultimately I logged on to the internet and checked their phone number, sorry, and then realized that that was a fraud organization. So I didn't talk to my friends. I actually checked online and came to know that's a fraud organization. So I'm a very individualized person. When I might be inspired to share it on my Facebook, but I rarely will go and talk to my friends. So I'm individualized, and the problem is very localized. So one particular online shop not delivering in particular state is a very local problem, whereas in Delhi I might be happy with that online shop. And of course, very issue specific. The audience is very issue specific. So whether it is an issue related to human happiness, health, wealth, and maybe a simple issue like cleanliness, I am only looking at media content or programs which is handling that particular issue. So the public, the concept of the audience, the wider audience vis-a-vis the modern media had become very individualized, localized, as well as very issue specific. Therefore, what the market is also doing is looking at very issue specific content. I will try to tell you one thing. Say one day where you are on your email and that email is open and then you Google up something else, your email is still open. You know the computer reads it, that you had Googled up something on wildlife, say wildlife. You wanted to know something on wildlife. Next you open your email, there is a scroll coming up there where they will tell you about many things about wildlife. So the content they are generating for me is dependent on my choice. They will advertise on my Facebook, the right side scrolls will go on advertising on things that I have recently Googled or recently searched on internet. So you look at how the advertisers are working. They are looking at your specific interest because you are a specific issue based person, localized, individualized, and accordingly advertising products for you. Now let's go to the theories. Say there are 4 theories which try to analyze audience media relationship. All these theories I had actually discussed in my previous classes, but because it's a special class on audience theory, so I will have to repeat it, and of course there is a different context to this theory when it comes to the audience. So I'll try to relate it from that perspective. Hypodermic needle theory is also a theory of media effect. What this theory says is that the mass media has a direct, immediate and powerful effect. It was the basic theory. It just started when new media had come. It was based on the popularity of radio and television, importance of advertising and propaganda happening at that time, and there was a pain-fun studies of the 1930s which focused on the impact of motion pictures on children. What the pain-fun studies did was, for a long period from 20s to 30s, they did a study on how the movies affected people and the children basically, and on the basis of that there some restrictions were put on how the movies should be made for children, what they should watch and what they should not. And of course, this theory also developed from Hitler's use of mass media during World War II to unify the German public and gain legitimacy for his agenda. Of course, the most favorite, and I often quote it in my own classes for the media effect theory, is the War of the Worlds radio program. Now, this was for the media effect theory. What about the audience? I'll just explain to you. Before explaining to you how it can be related to audience theory, I'd like to tell you about what happened. On 30th of October of 1938, Orson Welles and his new group called Mercury Theatre Group, they broadcast a radio play based on Wells's War of Worlds. I hope you know H.G. Wells. He is a science fiction, very popular science fiction writer, and you should try his books. It's really interesting. And on the eve of Halloween, I hope you know what is Halloween. It's a special day for the Christians. You can look up and look at what Halloween means for them, and then of course you will reconnect better. So on the eve, the day before Halloween, the radio, the program which was on radio was interrupted and a news bulletin was broadcast. Actually, it was the play. In the form of a news bulletin, it was broadcast that the aliens from Mars had invaded a place in New Jersey which was called Grover's Mill. There was mass hysteria, people just scattered here and there, tried to gather their things, they fled home, took shelter in rural areas, and things like that happened. And the nation, the North American nation was in a state of chaos, and this broadcast was the cause of it. It is cited as a classic example of how media can inject message into the bloodstream of people, and on that basis, the audience theory also uses it. Audience theory, as I said, is from the perspective of the media. So when media, the people in the media or advertising, they realized the effect of mass media on people, they understood that it actually is an effect on the audience. So the audience, what they do is react to anything, any information being put out to them through media in a very drastic way. It hits them hard. But you have to remember, it was the 20s and the 30s and the 50s or whatever. It was Not now. Now people have ways to reconfirm what's happening, understand what's happening. So I'm sure nobody can now really take you in that way. But yes, we always know there is a lot of gossip mongering happening in media as well. And some innocent people can be susceptible to it. We have complaints about people, about some channels running things on 3-headed dogs or 5-headed something, 2-headed, 3-headed serpents. So these are still there. So what I'm trying to tell you is that this was the starting point when audience was looked at as a monolith who reacted to new information on media in a direct way. They just were affected directly. And if you are interested, I have put the link of that program of H.G. Wells's play. It's available on YouTube. You can click, you can copy and paste it and look at it. It's very interesting, I can assure you. Lazarsfeld, Bertelsen and Gaudet, they did a study on the impact of media on the election results. And actually it was conducted during 1940s elections of Franklin D. Roosevelt of North America. And a study that they ultimately came up with was called People's Choice, and it proved that propaganda by media did not affect the views of the people. Rather, interpersonal communication was more impactful. This study had also undergone through the changes through the space of time. But what Lazarsfeld and Bertelsen came at Gaudet's study ultimately came out with was a two-step or multi-step flow of media, and this is very important for the audience theory. This theory negates the bullet effect of media and says that a community is more influenced by a particular segment of people who are more exposed to media. That's where the idea of opinion leader came in. And they say that it's not even you are consuming something, you will of course reiterate and reconfirm it from your opinion makers. You will look at people whom you believe knows better, or you might be the opinion maker. There might be a group of people, friends from your own school or college or your community, who will ask you, because you know that issue, that do you think this is right? This is what the media is saying, it's right. So what Lazarsfeld and Bertelsen and Gaudet's study said was that people are influenced more by a particular segment of people in their community or their area or their area of expertise who are more exposed to media. They are the opinion leaders. Their views have stronger effect on a community rather than the direct media content. So the media content is filtered, edited, and then given to the people. So again, the opinion leaders are today's gatekeeper as well. I'm not sure whether you can see the, yeah, you can. This is the model. This is what Lazarsfeld, it's from his book itself, and it's called the two-step flow model. This is, look at it, it's mass media, and people are in groups. The bigger circle is the opinion leaders, and the smaller tagged circles are the individuals in society who directly are in contact with the opinion maker, and they make the opinion from them. They might not consume mass media at all, they will make their opinion from them. However, in the 1950s, this finding of minimal effect of media was brushed aside, and media was used for short-term information delivery, persuasion and changes. So in the 1950s saw a lot of change. They say that media does have an effect. It's not that media does not have an effect. It's actually, it might be short term, it might be only for delivery or persuasion, but it will eventually be for change as well. And especially during the Cold War, mass media was used extensively for propaganda. As you know, I hope you know what is Cold War. Maybe I can give you a two-line explanation of it. Cold War was the time when the world was divided into basically three groups. The first world of comprising of the developed nations in the northern hemisphere, Americas, the Europes and things like that, and the other group was the second world, which comprises of the communist countries who were always fighting. There was a Cold War. It was not an open fight. It was a war of policies, of interaction, of discussion basically. And those people like India who were not aligned either to the North American group or the group of the developed countries or the group of the other communist group parties, so they were called the Third World. Actually the word Third World came from there, though it now has more, it means more about economic condition of a country rather than what it was. So Cold War was the time when the communist countries like China, USSR, Cuba and such countries were Korea, and all those nations were very strong, and they worked together to have a different alternate model of development, and the developed countries had an alternate mode of development. During that period, when Cold War was won, it actually, the end of Cold War came once the Berlin Wall was broken and the USSR dismantled itself into small countries, and there was nothing called United Socialist Soviet Republic. So before that period, before the 90s, from the World War II to 90s, the Cold War, during that period, mass media was used for extensive propaganda from both the sides. Agriculture extension. I hope you know your agriculture extension officers in your own villages, in your own tehsil. And the health education in the third world countries were also based on the belief of the power of mass media to persuade and change behavior of the masses. So when our green revolution happened in India, agriculture extension was extensively used to convince people about the necessities of good farming or developed farming practices. What is developed farming practices is something which is debated till now, but then it was convinced, people were convinced through mass media. The All India Radio had one particular desk which was extensively looking at agriculture communication. It was called Farm and Home Department, which is looking at agriculture, and there were pesticides, sorry, not pesticides, fertilizers which were called radio khad. There were seeds which were called radio seeds, because it was actually popularized by All India Radio. So it was believed that through information people can pick up good practices of agriculture and they will practice it, and we will eventually have better food grain output. And it did happen. India became successful in being sufficient in food grains. Similarly, in health, look at the family planning communication. So much of information on hum do, hamare do. People are sensitized. Ask anyone in the entire country, they know that the best family is to have 2 children. So it was a successful movement. So these messages, these uses of mass media to change the behavior of masses actually is dependent on the particular idea that media was strong and can convince and can change people. Let's come to the uses and gratification theory. It originated in the 1970s, and it was actually a reaction to the traditional mass communication research, which was emphasizing that the sender and the masses were more important. So it was not, the audience were just simple audience. They had nothing, they were not participating. They were ideal audience who were only receiving. So the traditional theory was always emphasizing that sender and the message was important and everybody is to consume it. But this theory says, uses and gratification theory says, that the people are active, and they are not only an active audience, they are active user as well. They use it. They use the information according to their own idiosyncrasies, according to their own socio-economic situation. The theory was propounded, this theory was particularly propounded by Elihu Katz, Dennis McQuell and Michael Gorewicz. Now, I hope you know Dennis McQuell. I have been repeating, read his book. It's very important to understand communication theory through him. You might have your critic, but he is the one who has combined every theory together and made it easier for you to understand. These three people, Elihu Katz, Dennis McQuell, and Michael Gorowitz, through this theory, they studied how audience utilize the media rather than media utilizing the audience. They based it on a audience study. A set of gratification were determined. What gratification they got? The gratifications that they could find out were cognitive needs to acquire information. This is one gratification that the audience gets from the use of media. Then there was affective needs, emotions, pleasures, and aesthetic experiences that people wants to have. Say you watch some movie and you are moved. You are moved beyond your imagination. You are happy. You are very, say you go and watch, and say you are on television, you watch a dance recital and you experience the aesthetic nuances of that dance. That actually gratifies your need for effective gratification. Then of course there is a personal integrative needs. It strengthens credibility, confidence, and status. You might be in a low morale and you don't know what's happening right now, and you watch a program where they make you feel, see, this is what you can do. Say there is a failure story in your life and you are listening to a radio program where they say that this is what happened to me, a very renowned personality. We all say, for example, we all get a lot of happiness out of knowing that Steve Jobs was a school dropout, but he could do so much, achieve so much in life, so I can too. That strengthens your confidence level, makes you feel good about it. And likewise, many other examples can come in. Social integrative need is to need to strengthen contacts with the family. So you feel connected. This feeling of connectivity, Indian population doesn't have that much of problem because we still stay with our family. Even a married son stay with their parents as long as they can. If the accommodation is good enough, they try to stay together. But it's a very huge problem in the modern developed societies, where the child goes out as soon as he or she is 18, goes out of the family and fends for himself or herself, and sometimes they do feel disconnected. Even if one of your cousin who is staying abroad somewhere, he really or she really wants to connect with the family. So a show where the Indianness is visible, he would like to watch it, and he gets gratified and feels good about connecting to his Indian roots. And of course, there is another gratification is the tension release needs, escaping from day-to-day mundane life, escaping from the pressure of daily life. This is one thing that we try to get from media products. Those movies that now we see on television, not on television, on screens, where it's a nonsensical comical things coming up. I'm not going to take names of the movie, you can always reconnect. Every day, this one, these two, these three, there are sequels of those movies coming up, and it's nonsensical humor, but we get a lot of, it's a relief, a tension relief pressure tactic from media. We consume it and we just get relaxed from a mundane life tension. So these are the gratifications that the users get out of media content. So I'll again repeat: the cognitive needs, the affective needs, personal integrative needs, social integrative needs, and tension release needs. Assumptions are that to explain how the individuals use mass communication to gratify their needs. This is one assumption that this theory does. What do people do with the media? We always believe that you are watching, so you are using it, but you use it differently. I might see something which you immediately conform, whereas your friend might say, no, this is never happening. So the same content might have two reactions coming in. to discover underlying motives for individuals' media use. The theory wants to discover the underlying motives for individuals, one individual's media use. Why? Why are you watching this particular program at this particular time? Is it just because of a habit, or is it because you want to get something out of it? Of course, to identify the positive and the negative consequences of individual media use, whether that particular use of that particular media has an negative or a positive consequence on the user. So these are the main three assumptions that the theory has. You should remember that the 1960s was the time that the first generation grew up with access to television. I am talking about the developed countries. We came quite late. In India, television came only in the 80s, properly developing all over the country. It became increasingly, that growth of the access to television became increasingly apparent to media theorists, that audiences make choice about what they did when consuming text. What they would do with the text, the audience does select. Far from being passive mass, audiences were made up of individuals that actively consume text in different ways. As I said, the same text can have a different effect on different people. So audiences, the entire idea of audience being a monolith was completely destroyed. Laswell in fact suggested that media had the following functions for individuals in society. What are the functions? Media actually does surveillance for the society. It correlates issues for the society. It entertains people. It helps in cultural transmission, and of course it narrates history. I'll just explain it a little bit. Surveillance is, say there is something that had happened, say recently this Jammu Kashmir flood had happened, and because of the media we could know how much the destruction has been, what was the rescue operation like, and how people are suffering and things like that. So they were in continuous surveillance of that issue. Then of course there are issues where we can correlate. Say I might have heard something, overheard something, and next day I pick up my newspaper to really understand whether it really did happen, or if it did happen, how did it happen. And we get so much entertainment media. I don't think I should explain it to you. You are entertained all the time for media. In fact, 70% of the program in media is all about entertainment. And cultural transmission. I'll tell you one thing. When All India Radio started, what they did was they used to broadcast very many national program of music, folk music, classical music, and things like that. And through those programs, all over the country now, when you hear say a particular music, you can actually communicate, you can actually understand it. Okay, this sounds like something I have heard, and it should be Karnataki, or maybe, yeah. So this sort of cultural transmission about the entire country, making it a coherent country to understand that this is also Indian, is what media does. And media actually elaborately explains to us the historical context of our own country, or any country for that matter. So those shows which have history completely ingrained into it is something that people are looking up to. People want to know that for particular fort in particular state, why did it come up, who did it, how did it come up. So all this historical narrative actually is one of the functions of media. Let me go to the last theory, which is called the reception theory. It was formulated by Stuart Hall, who was in fact a cultural theorist, and he had looked at media and communication from the perspective of cultural theory. And when he devised this reception theory, he actually depended on the reader response theory of literature, where how the reader responds to literature, and this is what he completely used in trying to understand the relationship of audience and the media content. It depends on the encoding decoding model of communication. That is, do I encode? Say I am a producer of a media content. I encode my program in such a way which is my particular way of encoding, and while you as a consumer decode it or try to understand it, you understand it from your own decoding perspective. So what does the theory say? The theory say when a journalist or a communicator writes a text, it is encoded with a meaning or message that he or she wishes to convey to the audience. That means it is completely on the basis of my idea of what message I want to give out as a producer, that this message is constructed. In some instances, audiences will correctly decode the message or meaning and understand what the producer was trying to say. Sometimes it's directly you can relate to that message. Say, as I said on those examples, cigarette smoking is injurious to health. Actually, we immediately decode it directly as that. 90% of the population will do it. But the smokers, they always will not decode it that way. They will say, see, someone in my family or some family died of lung cancer, whereas he was a teetotaler and things. You will have other explanations to give beyond that message. So in some instances, the audience will either reject or fail to correctly understand the message. It happens. And many such social messages, because we don't look at the construct of the audience and code it, that it's lost on the population. So Hall identified three types of audience reading or decoding of the text. One is the dominant or preferred, one is the negotiated, and the third is the oppositional. So who is a dominant audience? Where the audience decodes the message as the producer wants them to do and broadly agrees with it. For example, you are watching a political speech and you agree to everything that the political speech is having. That is the dominant one. This is where the audience completely dominantly agree with what the message gives you. There is another group of audience who has a negotiated way, where the audience accepts, rejects or refines elements of the text in the light of previously held views. So in say the same political speech, some of them will have some ideas inside them about certain issues, and even if you are directly giving, the political speech is directly accepting, or if they are negating his views, he will have his own reservations because he already knows a lot about it. So he will not take it as it is, he will decode it according to his previous knowledge. And there is an oppositional audience who will completely negate what has been said, where the dominant meaning is recognized but rejected for many reasons. One is cultural, sometimes it's political, or sometimes it's ideological. So the total rejection, someone might totally reject a political speech and actively oppose that. So this is where we come to an end to the audience theory. I hope you understand it. Let me just do a small recap. In the audience theory, the audience is looked at as a group of people on whom media has some effect. Media, how they decode, encode, understand media, consumes media, why they consume media, in what perspective, why do they behave the way they do for certain programs, why people get swayed away by some things and completely reject something. This is what the audience theory wants to know. And you have to understand it's from the perspective of the media. The media wants to understand the audience and accordingly devise their programs. So it is also from the perspective of the advertisers. They want to know their audience. They want to see how they are fragmented, how they are together, where they are together, issues they oppose, issues where they come together. So this is from where audience theory looks at communication and media. So some of the theories that you have seen here will come into sociological theory. I had already told you, you cannot put any theory in an airtight compartment and say that this is one theory. This is not natural sciences, it's a part of human sciences. So obviously there will be gray areas where we meet, where we depart, and where we meet again. So with that note, I hope you understood, and look at Macquarie again, try to understand audience better. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much. You talked about community media, and if we talk about the community media, maybe it's my conception or misconception. Can we say that community participation, if we talk about media in the present context, community participation could be example of audience theory?
Yeah, definitely. See, community participation is on which a particular media thrives. Say, it's believed that if you want to have a good media content, it should be from the community. That is why the community radio always believes that the program should be from the community rather than I doing something and putting it on them. So the content is generated from there. So there the media audience becomes the content person who the group who generates the content, and there the communication between the media and the audience is beyond those people who are mediating in between. So community participation is the ideal form of content generation.
That is, we can say that the media in this way becomes highly democratic, that is for the people, by the people and of the people.
Definitely.
Now the question is, we talked about advertisements and promotional activities also, but this advertisement or promotional activities is a form of social discontent between those people who can actually buy those products and those who cannot buy the product.
Yeah, it is. But then when the advertiser actually advertise some content or say product, what they do is they know that there will be people who will never be able to buy it, but they can actually make them aware. So what happens is that today once some product is priced for, say, very highly priced, once that awareness is generated, it will go down, the price will go down. Look at the mobile handsets. When it is launched, it's highly priced, and slowly the price goes down, but in the meantime the advertisement sector works hard to make the people aspire for it. Similarly, look at beauty products. What they do is, it's very interesting that in developed countries you will never find a small sachet of shampoo, neither you will find a small tube of toothpaste or something like that, because the consumers in India has a complete economic divide. Some people actually earns daily and spends daily. So for them, it's easier to buy one packet, 1 rupee shampoo rather than buy a 170 rupees big shampoo, big tube. So ultimately, they have to generate that interest in that group as well. So if you are advertising for some product, then what you have to do is you have to advertise for those people who are also potential buyers. So you will immediately release in the market sachet, which people can use. So the fragmentation is beyond. The market is very interesting. How they really attracts consumer and how they look at consumer as a behavioral scientist is very interesting, in fact.
With this note, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much. The way you delivered is always commendable. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thanks.